President Trump is bringing North Korea to the negotiating table, but he just shoved Iran away. Congress is searching for a moral compass at the CIA, and Michael Cohen is sinking further into ethical quagmires of his own. Plus, a round of primaries sets the stage for this fall's midterm elections. But right now, it's only May, and it's only Thursday. I'm Molly Roberts. Joining me are opinion writers Jason Rezaian, Ruth Marcus, and Steve Stromberg. At 3 o'clock in the morning today, President Trump welcomed home 3 Americans freed from prison in North Korea. He said his proudest achievement would be when the Korean peninsula is completely denuclearized, but suggested this was a bonus ahead of his meeting with Kim Jong-un.
It was sort of understood that we'd be able to get these 3 terrific people during the meeting and bring them home after the meeting, and he was nice in letting them go before the meeting. I mean, frankly, we didn't think this was going to happen, and it did.
Jason, you spent more than 500 days in prison in Iran. What was going through your head when you saw these 3 men come home?
Well, a lot. I woke up this morning. I wasn't awake at 3 a.m., but I was very happy to see that they had been released and relieved for them and their families, but also sort of struck by the spectacle of the whole thing. Knowing what it's like to come out of that sort of isolation and lack of any kind of free will to make choices, to be thrust into a situation like that must have been pretty jarring for them. And I just hope that they have the opportunity to get some rest and medical attention and heal with their families.
Can I ask Jason what you thought of the president's use of the word nice to describe Kim Jong-un's action?
I mean, excellent.
Kim was responsible for detaining these
Exactly.
people. So nice would not have been the word I would use.
No.
I'm leading the witness here.
Right. No, I think it sort of nullifies the bad action of taking them in the first place. And while we have other Americans still in prison in Iran and other countries as well, I think it sends the wrong message. But I don't think he was really thinking about that. I think he was thinking more of the victory that he could claim.
Well, great ratings.
Right,
Best
right.
ever ratings at 3
At 3
a.m.
I don't know if he can prove that, but probably there was a lot
I
of
don't
people
think that
watching.
really is one of his concerns.
No, you're right.
And a year ago, just about, we saw Otto Warmbier come back, and that was not the kind of joyous return that we saw here. And so important not to lose sight of that, as this seems like a victory and a nice gesture from the North Korean dictator. So North Korea now is in a weakened negotiating state with its nuclear test site compromised, and by compromised I mean they detonated nuclear weapons under a mountain and the mountain collapsed. So why is Kim Jong-un coming to the table now, Steve?
I would back on the hostage release. I think that in microcosm actually reflects the broader strategy that North Korea has used over and over and over again, which is they do bad things. They take prisoners, basically hostages.
They test nuclear weapons.
They test nuclear weapons. They do some, things that rile the international community, and rightly, and then they demand concessions or praise when they sort of release the prisoners, shut down a nuclear testing site that's collapsing, that sort of thing. So I see very little that is different from their past behavior in this respect.
And what do we think is going to come out of this negotiation? Trump says this is a gesture of such goodwill. He really wants to do something. Do we think anything is going to get done in a way that would be beneficial to the United States?
Of course, Trump has said he'll walk out of any meeting that doesn't result in what he's looking for, and he said what he's looking for is complete denuclearization. It seems extremely unlikely that Kim would ever agree to that sort of denuclearization, the sort of denuclearization that the United States is interested in. So it's unlikely that Trump is going to ultimately get what he wants here. On the other hand, the South Koreans have been seeking a drawn-out, long negotiation process that sort of puts off any prospect of war as long as possible. That may occur. But again, whether Trump gets the big negotiated win that he's looking for is very unlikely.
So as long as we're talking about nuclear deals, we have another one on the table. President Trump announced this week that the United States is leaving the Iran nuclear deal and reinstating sanctions because the country was, quote, on the cusp of acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons. World leaders slammed the announcement, while Iran pledged to stick with the international accord.
The nuclear deal with Iran is the culmination of 12 years of diplomacy. The European Union is determined to preserve it. To the Iranian citizens and leaders, do not let anyone dismantle this agreement.
مذاکرات لازم رو انجام بده. اگر در پایان این مهلت و زمان کوتاه ما به این نتیجه رسیدیم که با همکاری 5 کشور می توانیم همه آنچه در برجام خواست ملت ایران بوده به دست آوریم.
The Israeli prime minister was elated by Trump's move.
The deal didn't push war further away. It actually brought it closer. The terrorist regime in Tehran is developing a ballistic missile capability. Ballistic missiles to carry nuclear warheads far and wide. Israel thanks President Trump for his courageous leadership.
And now, Israel is firing on Iranian positions in Syria while blaming Iran for firing on Israeli positions in the Golan Heights. Netanyahu said Iran was bringing us closer to war with the nuclear deal, but it doesn't look like we're any further away without it. So, Jason, what trajectory are Israel and the United States on?
Well, I think, what we're seeing right now is the manufacturing of a crisis where we don't need one, first of all, and two, where we had sort of resolved the crisis. Iran is very clearly, verifiably not on the cusp of having a nuclear weapon. I mean, I think that's the point that we need to kind of come home to. And I think the idea that we would exit this deal with Iran after so many years of diplomatic engagement with other world powers and exit a deal that was the first time that Iran was really in compliance on anything is sort of ill-advised at this moment in time.
Very ill-advised.
That's very restrained of Jason.
Well, look, I think that the reality is, I'm one of the Americans that should have plenty to say about, the sort of things that Iran does to its own people, to visitors to that country, its role in disrupting stability in the region, and at the same time, the IAEA, which was tasked with verifying whether or not Iran was in compliance, 11 times in a row said they're in compliance. So why do we need to do this right now? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Oh, I have an answer for that.
Please.
My answer for that is we need to do this right now because it's something that, first of all, Barack Obama did.
Right.
So President Trump wants to undo it.
Right.
And number two, it's something that President Trump has been itching to do. Horrible, horrible deal. He said during the campaign, worst deal ever, dumb, dumb, dumb. And he's been restrained by some of his advisors from undoing it all along. And so pretty much now the time was up, but this moment was always coming. What interests me about this move is the implications not only for Iran and the region of undoing the deal and the potential instability that causes. And by the way, on that point, even if you were, if thought it was a bad deal at the time, that's a different question than whether it should be undone now. Because many people who thought it was a bad deal that we shouldn't enter into also think now that it's a mistake to get out of it. But leaving that aside, I'm interested also in the implications for our relationship with our allies, who are just furious with us, and also the implications for our ability to negotiate a effective deal with North Korea. Because why would Kim watching us get out of one deal that a U.S. president agreed to in a way that led another nuclear power, or would-be nuclear power, Iran, to rely on, why would he rely on the word of this president when his successor could blow it all up, pardon the phrase.
Especially at a time when he's so much farther ahead. He already has his
Right.
bombs, and
Yeah.
you know, he's not in the business of trying to placate a restive public. I mean, that's never been the aim of the North Korean regime. So yeah, I think you're right that you know, it's going to send the wrong message altogether.
Well, and getting back to the allies' point, this is really important because Trump leaving the Paris Agreement didn't hit like this. The the tariffs, possible trade war didn't hit like this. Emmanuel Macron, president of France, moved heaven and earth to try to salvage this deal, put some personal reputation on the line, offered Trump ways out, off-ramps, so that the deal wouldn't have to be totally scrapped. That all failed. You know, if the Europeans didn't already believe that they had an unreliable partner in the United States under the era of Trump, then they certainly do now.
And one that can actually have real-world practical implications for their companies, which have been
Yes.
doing business in Iran now that sanctions have been lifted on the understanding that if they were all good to go. What happens now when the Trump administration sanctions European countries?
Right.
I mean companies,
It's
sorry.
going to be very complicated. One more thing I want to infuse in the conversation is about the Americans that are still being held in Iran. I mean, literally the day after you bring, you know, these American citizens from North Korea home, the 5 American citizens and 2 U.S. Permanent residents that are stuck in prison in Iran, I don't see a possibility to bring them home anytime soon, because all of our channels of direct negotiation with Iran just were severed.
Well, I think that the Trump theory of the case, in so much as it exists, is we reimpose sanctions and then we get everything we want from Iran.
Good
so
luck.
I'm sure that's the plan, right?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, I had questions, but you guys hit all the points I meant to ask about, so I want to remind our viewers that they can ask questions of the guests too, and maybe push even beyond all the scintillating stuff I had prepared. But we're going to move on to our next topic, which is Gina Haspel. America's moral core was on a trial of sorts this week when Gina Haspel, President Trump's pick to lead the CIA, appeared before Congress. Haspel oversaw a secret CIA prison, or black site, in Thailand, where torture was used after the September 11th terrorist attacks, and she tried to get that big question out of the way early.
In light of my counterterrorism experience, I understand that what many people want to know about are my views on CIA's former detention and interrogation program. Having served in that tumultuous time, I can offer you my personal commitment, clearly and without reservation, that under my leadership, on my watch, CIA will not restart a detention and interrogation program.
Republican Senator John McCain, who was tortured as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, isn't convinced. He tweeted, "I believe Gina Haspel is a patriot who loves our country and has devoted her professional life to its service and defense. However, her role in overseeing the use of torture is disturbing, and her refusal to acknowledge torture's immorality is disqualifying." So I think first it's kind of just useful to lay out which way do we think the Senate is going to go on this at this point. Then we can talk about our own reactions to whether we, like McCain, are unconvinced.
So, 51 Republican senators. One of them is John McCain. We know which way he's going if he were able to come vote. But and then we had Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat, and I think that there's another Republican senator, hasn't Rand Paul?
Rand
Yes,
Paul,
said
yeah, that's
said
right.
that he would oppose.
Yeah.
So now we're down to 49. But if Joe Manchin continues to support Gina Haspel as he has said he was going to do, that gets us to 50, and that gets us to, I don't know how many ties that the vice president has had a chance to break for nominations, but it is a record number, and this could be another one of them.
Yeah, he must be having a blast.
And also, if Manchin moves, you want to imagine that some other moderate
But worst
Democrats
case,
move. Worst case, yeah.
scenario,
Yeah.
unless something else transpires that's
Right.
surprising.
Yeah.
So how did she do as far as convincing senators who might have been on the fence? She had to go and she had to reassure people essentially what Mark Warner laid out, that she thought that this was wrong and would not do it again. She said, I won't do this again because it's illegal. Did she answer to our satisfaction or to any of your satisfaction that it was wrong?
Not to my satisfaction, not to Senator McCain's satisfaction, and I suspect, without knowing, not to Senator Warner's satisfaction. She can tell us all she wants that we're not going to do this again, but of course the law tells us we're not going to do this again.
Right.
Why would it have been so hard to say, in retrospect, we lost our way, this was not consistent with American values? That she was unable to say that, I thought, was telling and disappointing.
I don't think a person who has that sort of track record that's been demonstrated should be put forward for such a position, because I think it sends a wrong message to the American people about what we're up to in the world, but also to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I hope on that count that the Senate votes against her.
Yeah, I really wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, and that's for two reasons. Number one is, you could say this was 2002, 2003. This was the country was reacting to an attack. They were being told and pressured by the White House and other elements of the administration to be aggressive. And so that was one part of the. We sort of forget what the universe was like back then. And then number two, you also don't know what you're going to get out of the Trump administration if not her, and she did seem competent.
She's
if nothing,
no doubt competent.
No doubt competent.
Yeah.
But she failed to really address, as you say, the question of, in retrospect, despite what it felt like back then, despite what you were being told by the White House, was that right? And she didn't do it. She was asked directly over and over again, and she wouldn't commit to anything but, we're not going to do it again.
And let me say something about why I think that's important. The exact same set of scenarios may come up, but it may not come up. We have a bunch of new rules and laws and orders on the books that tell us what is permissible and not in terms of interrogations. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other areas in which morally fraught choices will be confronted by an administration
Exactly.
and potentially a CIA director over the use of drone strikes, over how you want to factor in the question of civilian casualties. You have a president who says, I don't really go ahead and go after their women and children, I don't care. The question is what her moral compass, which she assures us is strong, will say in other contexts, and her failure to see in retrospect two really important words, the problem of this behavior, suggests that moral compass is wavering more than makes me very comfortable.
One unanswerable question that I would really like to know the answer to is, what does Trump think about her answer that she would refuse a moral order? Does he believe that or not?
And she wouldn't answer whether she would then inform Congress if she were given an order that she deemed immoral and decided to follow up on. We have a bunch of commentary and questions on Facebook. Meredith Wheeler says, as an American in Europe, yes, the reputation of the USA is sinking fast over here, not helped by low-quality ambassadorial appointments such as the new ambassador in Germany. So that kind of goes along the lines of what message is the United States sending the world. We also have a little debate on Facebook. Michael D. Nye says, for better or worse, Haspel is an expert at keeping secrets and misdirection. Will we believe her now? And Doug Bingaman responds, misogyny by those of you on the left? Then Lissa Hattersley responds to Doug. See, they're having a more lively debate than we're having here. We get them on the show next time. Lissa says, not misogyny. She has no moral compass, and it would send a bad signal to the world.
Oh, okay. I got to be heard on the misogyny point.
Please.
This is just infuriating. It would be great to have the first woman CIA director, no question about that. It is otherwise qualified. It is a fantastic mark in Gina Haspel's favor that she came up through the ranks of CIA when it was not an easy place for women to achieve. And so good for her and good for us that we're at that point. But you do not get graded on a curve and excused for bad behavior because of your gender. That is not misogyny. That is reasonable senatorial and public judgments about who's qualified and who's not. And it would be the height of misogyny to accept a woman doing something because she's a woman when you would have problems with a man behaving the same way. So take that, Facebook folks.
Yes, it is not exactly
comment though.
It is not exactly an inspiring message to say women can draft a memo ordering the destruction of incriminating videotapes as well as men, and it is also not exactly inspiring to suggest that a woman could never be produced who would not have done those bad things and would have risen in the same way. So hopefully in the future we see a nominee for CIA director who is a woman and who doesn't have that kind of track record. So yes, take that, folks, and please keep commenting so we can take you down again.
At your peril.
So we have to move away from the international arena a little bit. Back here, holy swamp monster, we learned this week that Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer, set up a company in October of 2016 that has made him a lot of money thanks to his ties to the president. The company, Essential Consultants, took in millions of dollars from corporations looking for insight into the Trump administration. Oh, and it also paid the hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels. So depending how involved Trump was in what Cohen was doing here, it seems there are a series of different legal and other implications for him. So I was wondering, Ruth, if you could break any of that down for us.
So I don't think we are at the what was Trump's involvement and what potential problems stage yet, based on the facts that we know. I love the name of this company, Essential Consultants, because it was really Essential Consultant, right? The fixer, Michael Cohen. I think what we've seen is pulling back the tarp on and sort of on the ugliness of the Washington swamp, which actually I have to say predates Donald Trump and is broader and more fetid than Michael Cohen. So his ability to use his unique essential insight into Donald Trump to, I don't want to say extort, to obtain remarkable sums of money from major corporations, AT&T, Novartis, Korean Airlines, or whatever I may be getting the name of the Korean airline improperly, is a really remarkable illustration of the desperation that Washington lobbyists felt when Donald Trump came in to get someone. First of all, they were scared to death that the president was going to tweet about them, and second of all, they didn't understand how to deal with this kind of new creature who would come to our town. The questions of how this money intersects with the Stormy Daniels hush money is really an open question. It is conceivable that the president wasn't just putting money into the Michael Cohen pot as the reimbursement for the Stormy Daniels payment, but that something was flowing out. But we just don't have those facts yet. So to me right now, this is more of a kind of disgusting Washington ethics story than it is on its own a legal implication story, either for Michael Cohen or for the president. Sorry.
That's no fun.
I know, but no, it's fun. I got to say fetid, and it's really interesting about the ethics of Washington. It's just a little bit less conclusive about the legalities.
I mean, there are some legal questions that still need to be answered, of course.
Sure.
One is whether or not he should have, depending on what he did for some of these clients, whether or not he should have registered as a lobbyist. What assurances or guarantees or whatever else, what did he say to these companies in return for millions of dollars?
What conversations did he have with the president?
What conversations did he have with the president? Exactly. So what is the presidential interaction? Of course, and the relationship between this Russian oligarch-related company.
Oh, we forgot to mention that.
And the Essential Consultants is very questionable and very tantalizing. We'd love to see exactly what they were interested in. Of course, the other funny thing about Essential Consultants, the name, is that it also turned out that they weren't particularly essential. You look at Novartis, that I think met with him and then realized he had nothing to offer them, and so they couldn't really terminate this really lucrative contract that they had with him, and yet they seem to have gained little or nothing from it. In circumstances like that, where he's just getting a lot of money for having known Trump or having been Trump's personal lawyer, it looks an awful lot not like consulting, but something grosser. So.
Well, it is grosser, but it might not be unique to
But
Michael
but it might
Cohen.
not be unique. Yeah, right, and that's also
Welcome
a
to
testament.
Washington.
Right, it's also a testament to the broader issues in Washington. Yeah.
All right, welcome to Washington, and we will zoom out to the rest of the country too. If you blinked, you might have missed the primary elections that took place Tuesday in Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, and North Carolina. So, do a little lightning round here. What did these primaries mean for Republicans, Democrats, and everyone in between? Trump said it was a great night to be a Republican, so we'll start with Steve and go down the line.
Well, it was not a good it was not a good night for Don Blankenship, which I guess meant it was a good night to be a Republican because this the West Virginia senatorial candidate lost and came in third, I believe. Right, so that was a good thing. For Democrats, the establishment basically prevailed in their primaries, which is another piece of evidence that the sort of much vaunted massive civil war within the party between the progressives and the sort of the more establishment wing seems not to be foiling the party, at least at this point in this cycle. So those are the two big things. Also, well, of course, there's also Ohio, actually, before I forget. Richard Cordray beat Dennis Kucinich. This is actually the biggest example of the sort of establishment Democrats prevailing over a more left-wing and progressive sort of candidate, setting up a race with Mike DeWine, who, of course, has long roots, family roots here in Washington and in politics. So in many ways, you saw, even on the Republican side, an establishment triumph as well. The one exception is there was an incumbent in North Carolina, a congressman who lost, though he had the guy who beat him had almost beat him before. So it's hard to tell exactly what that says about the mood.
So it was, for the most part, both an establishment win and a Trump win. Yeah. The establishment, such as it is, won in West Virginia, where Don Blankenship would have caused enormous heartburn, both specifically to Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, and to Republicans as they try to unseat Senator Manchin, who we mentioned earlier. Similarly, Rich Cordray's win over Dennis Kucinich in the Ohio governor's race, the more establishment candidate won. It's also notable that Don Blankenship's assertions notwithstanding, the Trumpier, but the Trump supporting candidate won. You saw, DeWine, both of the major candidates in Ohio on the Republican side were busy pledging their loyalty to Donald Trump. They were distancing themselves from the incumbent governor, John Kasich, who has not been exactly on Team Trump. And so this was an illustration. This was a good night for Donald Trump as well. And
Kasich has not yet endorsed DeWine, which is an interesting story. Of course, that seems to be in relation to some very specific Ohio things, but it also generally reflects this this tension between Kasich and Trump that still exists, and Kasich being one of the last Republicans, it seems like, that hasn't gone on the Trump bandwagon.
And I want to point out that we were talking about Gina Haspel, perhaps not as a victory for women, but it was a good night for women. A lot of women running for office did win. So we can smile about that at least.
We're smiling.
We're all smiling. We're out of time, but not opinions. So check us out at WashingtonPost.com/opinions. And if you're still waiting on a straight answer from Gina Haspel, good luck. Remember, it's only Thursday.